I found my father-in-law's body on a Tuesday afternoon. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside, my arms laden with groceries. "Frank?" I called out, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "I picked up your favorite cookies." No answer. Unease crept up my spine as I made my way to the living room. That's when I saw him, slumped in his favorite armchair, remote control still clutched in his lifeless hand. "Oh, God," I whispered, rushing to his side. "Frank! Frank! Can you hear me?" His skin was cold to the touch. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? "My father-in-law," I gasped. I think he's dead." The next few hours passed in a blur. Paramedics, police officers, and finally, my husband Ethan arrived. I watched as he stood in the doorway, his face a mask of shock and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Sarah," he said, his voice oddly flat. "What happened?" I shook my head, fighting back tears. "I don't know. I just found him like this when I came to drop off groceries." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving his father's body as it was zipped into a black bag. "Did you know?" he asked suddenly. "Know what?" He turned to me, his gaze hard. "About the gambling." I blinked, caught off guard. "Gambling? What are you talking about?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you didn't. He was always so good at hiding it." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "I found this in his desk drawer last week. Look." I took the paper, my eyes widening as I scanned its contents. It was a loan agreement for an astronomical sum, signed by Frank just days ago. "Oh, Ethan," I breathed. "I had no idea." He snatched the paper back, his jaw clenched. Neither did I, not until it was too late. As the last of the officials left, Ethan and I sat in stunned silence on the couch. The weight of Frank's secret hung heavy between us. "What are we going to tell your mother?" I asked softly. Ethan's laugh was hollow. "The truth, I suppose, that her beloved husband was a lying, cheating gambler who left us with nothing but debt." I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Ethan, please. He was still your father." "Was he?" Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the room. "A father doesn't do this to his family, Sarah. He doesn't lie and steal and—" His voice broke, and I saw a flash of the pain he was trying so hard to hide. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, standing to embrace him. But Ethan stepped back, his eyes cold. "Don't be. He got what he deserved." I stared at my husband, shocked by the venom in his voice. This wasn't the Ethan I knew, the kind and gentle man I'd married. In that moment, I felt a chill of fear. "We should call your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She'll want to know." Ethan nodded, pulling out his phone. As he dialed, I retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment to collect myself. I leaned against the counter, my mind reeling. How had I not known about Frank's gambling? And more importantly, what would this mean for our family? I thought of Marie, Ethan's doting mother, and how devastated she would be. From the living room, I heard Ethan's voice, unnaturally calm as he delivered the news. "Mom, it's Dad. He's gone." I closed my eyes, feeling the world shift beneath my feet. Nothing would ever be the same after today. As I listened to Ethan's one-sided conversation, a nagging thought wormed its way into my mind. If Frank had kept such a massive secret from all of us, what else didn't we know? The days following Frank's funeral were a blur of hushed conversations and tense silences. I watched Ethan like a hawk, searching for any sign of the man I married beneath this cold, angry stranger who had taken his place. One evening, as I was clearing the dinner dishes, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Fine," he snapped, shoving the phone in his pocket. "I'm going out." "Out, Ethan, it's nearly 9. The slam of the front door cut me off. I sank into a chair, my heart racing. This wasn't like him at all. Daisy, sensing my distress, jumped onto my lap. I buried my face in her soft fur, fighting back tears. "What's happening to us, girl?" Hours ticked by. I tried calling Ethan, but it went straight to voicemail. By midnight, worry had given way to anger. I was about to call the police when I heard the front door open. Ethan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and something else. Smoke? No, not quite. "Where have you been?" I demanded, rising to meet him. He waved me off, nearly losing his balance. "Out, told you." "You're drunk," I said, disbelief coloring my voice. Ethan rarely drank, and never to excess. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made me flinch. "Observant as always, Sarah. What's gotten into you?" I reached for him, but he jerked away. "Don't," he growled. "Just don't." I watched helplessly as he staggered to our bedroom, slamming the door behind him. Sleep eluded me that night as I tossed and turned on the couch, my mind racing. The next morning, I woke to find Ethan gone. A hastily scrawled note on the kitchen counter read, "Working late. Don't wait up." I crumpled the note, anger and fear warring in my chest. This couldn't go on. That afternoon, I made a decision. I drove to Marie's house, hoping she might have some insight into her son's behavior. Marie answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you about Ethan," I said, stepping inside. "He's not himself, Marie. I'm worried." She led me to the living room, gesturing for me to sit. "What do you mean, not himself?" I took a deep breath. "He's drinking, staying out late. He won't talk to me. It's like he's turning into Frank." Marie's face darkened. "Don't you dare compare my son to that man." "Marie, please," I pleaded. "I'm just trying to understand." "Understand what?" she snapped. "That my husband was a liar? That he left us with nothing but debt and shame?" I blinked, taken aback by her vehemence. I didn't know it was that bad." Marie laughed bitterly. "Of course you didn't. Frank was very good at hiding things." She fixed me with a hard stare. "And now you're accusing Ethan of the same?" "No, I'm just worried about him, about us." She stood abruptly. "My son is grieving, Sarah. He needs support, not accusations. If you can't provide that, perhaps you should reconsider your place in his life." I left Marie's house feeling worse than when I'd arrived. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Ethan's car was back. Relief flooded through me. But when I entered the house, that relief turned to ice in my veins. Ethan was at his father's desk, papers strewn everywhere, and in his hand was a familiar slip of paper, a betting slip. "Ethan?" I whispered, my voice shaking. He looked up, his eyes wild. "I figured it out, Sarah. I know how to fix everything." "What are you talking about?" He waved the betting slip. "Dad's system. It wasn't perfect, but I can make it work. I can win back everything he lost and more." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. This couldn't be happening. "Ethan, no. You can't." "I can," he insisted, a manic gleam in his eye. "And I will. You'll see, Sarah, I'll make everything right again." As I stared at my husband, a stranger wearing Ethan's face, I realized with sickening clarity that our troubles were only just beginning. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. Ethan's obsession with gambling consumed him, and our once peaceful home became a battleground. I tried everything to reason with him, but my words fell on deaf ears. One evening, I came home from grocery shopping to find Ethan pacing in the living room, his face ashen. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He whirled on me, eyes wild. "Where's your jewelry box?" My blood ran cold. "Why?" "I need it," he said, his voice desperate. "Just for a little while. I'm so close, Sarah. One more bet and I can win it all back." I backed away, shaking my head. "No, absolutely not. You don't understand." He lunged forward, grabbing my arms. "I have to do this." I wrenched free, heart pounding. "Stop it, Ethan. This has to end." "End?" He laughed bitterly. "It's only just beginning. I've figured it out, Sarah. Dad's system works. I just need a little more capital." "Listen to yourself," I cried. "You sound just like him." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Ethan's face contorted with rage. "I am nothing like him," he roared, sweeping his arm across the coffee table. Books and knickknacks crashed to the floor. I flinched, backing towards the door. "Ethan, please, you need help." "What I need," he snarled, "is a wife who supports me." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then grabbed his keys. "Where are you going?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Out," he snapped. "Don't wait up." The door slammed behind him, leaving me in stunned silence. Daisy crept out from under the couch, meowing softly. I scooped her up, burying my face in her fur as tears began to fall. "What am I going to do, girl?" I whispered. The next morning, I woke to find Ethan hadn't come home. Worry gnawed at me as I went through the motions of my day. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Marie. "Have you heard from Ethan?" I asked when she answered. "Of course," she replied, her tone frosty. "He's here now." Relief washed over me, quickly followed by anger. "He is. Put him on, please." "I don't think that's a good idea," Marie said. "He's very upset." "Upset? I'm the one who should be upset. Do you have any idea what's been going on?" Marie's voice hardened. "I know my son is going through a difficult time, and his wife isn't being very supportive." I gaped at the phone. "Supportive? He's gambling away everything we have." Don't be ridiculous, Marie scoffed. Ethan would never do that. You're overreacting, as usual. I am not, I began, but she cut me off. I think it's best if Ethan stays here for a while. You clearly need some time to get your priorities straight. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, disbelief and rage warring inside me. How could she be so blind? With shaking hands, I logged into our joint bank account. My heart stopped. Our savings were gone, every last penny. In a daze, I walked to our bedroom and opened my jewelry box. Empty. The necklace Ethan had given me for our anniversary, the earrings from my grandmother, all gone. As the reality of our situation crashed over me, a cold determination settled in my chest. I couldn't let this continue. I had to protect myself, even if it meant leaving the man I loved. I pulled out a suitcase and began to pack. As I zipped it closed, my eyes fell on a framed photo of Ethan and me on our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. With a sob, I placed the photo face down. That Ethan was gone, replaced by a stranger I no longer recognized. And I couldn't wait around, hoping he'd come back. As I loaded Daisy into her carrier and my suitcase into the car, I took one last look at the house we'd made a home. Then, with a heavy heart but a firm resolve, I drove away, leaving behind the shattered remains of the life we'd built together. I found temporary refuge at my friend Lisa's apartment, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. After a sleepless night, I steeled myself and dialed Marie's number. It was time to face this head-on. Sarah? Marie's voice was laced with surprise and a hint of disdain. What do you want? We need to talk, I said firmly. About Ethan. Can I come over? A long pause. Fine, but make it quick. An hour later, I stood on Marie's doorstep, heart pounding. She opened the door, her lips pressed into a thin line. Where's Ethan? I asked, stepping inside. Out, she replied curtly. Now what's this about? I took a deep breath. Marie, Ethan has a gambling problem. He's emptied our bank accounts, stolen my jewelry. Nonsense, Marie interrupted. Ethan would never do such a thing. You're just trying to cover up your own failings as a wife. I gaped at her. My failings? Marie, open your eyes. Your son needs help. The only thing my son needs, she hissed, is for you to stop making these ridiculous accusations. Just then the front door burst open. Ethan stumbled in, eyes bloodshot, clothes disheveled. Mom, he froze when he saw me. Sarah, what are you doing here? Trying to knock some sense into your mother, I said, my voice shaking. Ethan, please, tell her the truth. He looked between us, panic flashing across his face. Then, to my horror, he turned to Marie with a pleading expression. Mom, don't listen to her. Sarah's been acting crazy lately. She's the one with the problem. I couldn't believe my ears. Ethan, how can you? See? Marie cut in triumphantly. I knew you were lying. Get out of my house, Sarah, now. No, I said, standing my ground. Not until you both face reality. Ethan, show her your betting slips. Show her our empty bank accounts. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm roughly. I said, shut up. Ethan, Marie gasped. Let her go. For a moment I saw a flicker of the old Ethan in his eyes, shock at his own actions. He released me, stumbling back. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I didn't mean... I rubbed my arm, fighting back tears. This isn't you, Ethan. Please let us help you. Marie looked between us, uncertainty creeping into her expression for the first time. Ethan, darling, what's going on? Ethan's shoulders slumped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled betting slip. I messed up, Mom. I thought I could fix it, but... Marie's face drained of color as she read the slip. Oh, Ethan, how much? Everything, he whispered. I've lost everything. The room fell silent. I watched as the truth finally sank in for Marie, her world crumbling around her, just as mine had. We need to get you help, I said softly. Real help, Ethan, before it's too late. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know. I'm so sorry, Sarah, for everything. As I looked at my broken husband and his shattered mother, I felt a mix of emotions, relief that the truth was finally out, anger at the pain they'd put me through, and a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way through this. But as Ethan reached for me, I stepped back. I can't stay here, I said. I need time to think, to figure out what's best for me. Sarah, please, Ethan begged. Don't leave. I met his gaze, my heart breaking all over again. I'm sorry, Ethan, but I have to protect myself now. I hope you get the help you need, I really do. But I can't be the one to save you. With that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the ruins of the life I once knew. As I drove away, I realized that for the first time in months, I could breathe again. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now I was in control of my own destiny. The weeks following my confrontation with Ethan and Marie were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days. I threw myself into my writing, grateful for the distraction it provided. Daisy was my constant companion, her purrs a soothing balm for my frayed nerves. One afternoon, as I was working on a deadline, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Sarah?" His voice was small, hesitant. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "About what, Ethan?" I've started therapy. Gamblers Anonymous, too. I want to make things right." I closed my eyes, fighting the surge of hope his words triggered. "I'm glad you're getting help, but—" "Please," he interrupted. "Just hear me out. Can we meet?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Ethan in a quiet cafe. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him. Less haggard, more like the man I'd married. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he began, his eyes brimming with tears. "For everything. I know I've hurt you beyond words." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I've been working hard in therapy," he continued. "I understand now how my addiction affected you, how I pushed you away. I want to make amends." As he spoke, I felt my resolve wavering. This was the Ethan I knew, the one I'd fallen in love with. But then I remembered the emptied bank accounts, the stolen jewelry, the lies. "I appreciate that, Ethan," I said carefully, "but I don't know if—" He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you, Sarah. We can start over, build something new." I pulled my hand away, my mind reeling. "I need time to think," I said, standing up. "I can't make any decisions right now." As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Marie. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "It's about Ethan's inheritance." Confused, I agreed to meet her at her house. When I arrived, Marie ushered me in, her face uncharacteristically somber. "I've made a terrible mistake," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've enabled Ethan's behavior for far too long." I stared at her, shocked by this admission. "There's something you should know," she continued. "Frank left a substantial inheritance for Ethan, but with conditions. He must complete a rehabilitation program and demonstrate financial responsibility." My mind raced. "Does Ethan know about this?" Marie shook her head. "No, I was afraid it would push him further away. But now I see that was wrong." She took a deep breath. "I want to propose something, a divorce settlement with a hefty alimony for you." I gaped at her. "What?" "It's the least I can do," she said. "You've suffered enough. This way you'll be taken care of, and Ethan will have the motivation he needs to get better." I sat back, stunned. The offer was tempting. A clean break, financial security. But something didn't sit right. "And what about Ethan?" I asked. "He's trying to get better. Wouldn't this feel like abandonment?" Marie's eyes hardened. "Sometimes tough love is necessary. You've given enough, Sarah. It's time to think of yourself." As I left Marie's house, my mind was in turmoil. Ethan's apparent progress, Marie's surprising offer, the revelation about the inheritance. It was all too much. Back in my temporary apartment, I scooped up Daisy, burying my face in her fur. "What should I do, girl?" I whispered. The choice before me was clear, yet impossibly difficult. Do I give Ethan another chance, risking my heart and financial security? Or do I accept Marie's offer, ensuring my own well-being, but potentially derailing Ethan's recovery? As night fell, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I knew that by morning, I would have to make a decision that would change the course of all our lives forever. The morning after my conversation with Marie, I woke with a sense of dread. I had to make a decision, and fast. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Can we talk? It's important." My heart raced. Did he know about Marie's offer? I agreed to meet him at our old favorite park, a place that once held happy memories but now felt tainted by recent events. Ethan was already there when I arrived, pacing nervously. When he saw me, his face lit up with hope, making my chest tighten. "Sarah," he said, reaching for my hand. I let him take it, noticing how his palm felt clammy against mine. "I have something to tell you." I braced myself. "What is it, Ethan?" He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a spot in an intensive rehabilitation program. 6 months, out of state. I want to go, to get better, for us." I felt a mix of emotions, pride, hope, and an overwhelming sadness. "That's wonderful, Ethan. I'm proud of you for taking this step. His eyes searched mine. Will you wait for me? Give us another chance when I come back? Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Marie. With a sinking feeling, I answered. Sarah. Marie's voice was frantic. I need to see you immediately. It's about the divorce settlement. I looked at Ethan, who was watching me with confusion. I'll be right there, I said, hanging up. What's going on? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. I took a deep breath. Your mother offered me a divorce settlement with alimony. Ethan's face drained of color. What? When? Yesterday, I admitted. I haven't decided anything yet. Anger flashed in Ethan's eyes. So while I've been working on getting better, you've been plotting to leave me? No, I protested. It's not like that. I was going to tell you. Save it, he spat. I should have known you'd give up on me. As Ethan stormed off, I felt my world crumbling. I had to see Marie to understand what was happening. When I arrived at Marie's house, I found her in a state of panic. Sarah, thank goodness you're here. We have a problem. What kind of problem? I asked warily. Marie wrung her hands. The inheritance, it's gone. I stared at her, uncomprehending. What do you mean, gone? I made a terrible mistake, she whispered. I thought I could double it, make things right, but I lost it all. The realization hit me like a truck. You gambled it away. Marie nodded, tears streaming down her face. I was trying to fix things, to make up for enabling Ethan, but I've ruined everything. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. So, there's no alimony? No inheritance for Ethan? Nothing, Marie confirmed. We're both broke. As the gravity of the situation sank in, I felt a strange sense of clarity. All this time I'd been torn between my love for Ethan and my need for security. But now, with everything stripped away, I realized what truly mattered. I have to go, I said abruptly, leaving a sobbing Marie behind. I raced back to the park, praying Ethan was still there. To my relief, I found him sitting on our old bench, head in his hands. Ethan, I called out, breathless. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Come to say goodbye? I shook my head, sitting beside him. No, I came to say I'm sorry, and that I love you. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. But the settlement... There is no settlement, I explained, recounting Marie's confession, but that doesn't matter. What matters is us fighting this together. As Ethan pulled me into a tight embrace, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had a long, hard road ahead of us, but for the first time in months, I felt like we might just make it. But as we sat there, clinging to each other and our fragile new beginning, I couldn't shake the feeling that our biggest challenge was yet to come. The day Ethan was set to leave for rehab dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. We stood in the airport, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. I'll call you when I can, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise, Sarah, I'll get better. I nodded, fighting back tears. I know you will. I believe in you. As I watched him disappear through security, a mix of hope and fear churned in my stomach. 6 months. We could make it through 6 months. But life had other plans. 2 weeks after Ethan left, I received a frantic call from Marie. Sarah, you need to come over right away. It's about Ethan. My heart raced as I drove to Marie's house. Had something happened at the rehab center? Marie was pacing when I arrived, her face ashen. I've made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice quavering. What are you talking about? I asked, dread building in my chest. She handed me a stack of papers, her hands shaking. I found these in Ethan's old room. They're betting slips, recent ones. I flipped through the papers, my world tilting on its axis. The dates on the slips were all from after Ethan had supposedly started his recovery. Some were from just days before he left for rehab. This can't be right, I whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. Marie collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I've enabled him again, haven't I? I gave him money for expenses at rehab, but he never went, did he? The realization hit me like a physical blow. Ethan had lied. Again, he wasn't in rehab. He was out there somewhere, gambling away our last chance at a future. As if on cue, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? I answered, my voice trembling. Is this Sarah? A gruff male voice asked, I'm calling about your husband, Ethan. My blood ran cold. Yes, this is Sarah. What's happened? Ma'am, I'm afraid your husband owes a substantial amount of money to some less than reputable individuals. They're looking for him and they're not happy. The world seemed to spin around me. How much? I managed to ask. The figure he named made my knees buckle. it was more than we could ever hope to repay. "You have 48 hours to come up with the money," the voice continued, "or things might get unpleasant for Ethan." The line went dead. I looked at Marie, who had heard every word, her face a mask of horror. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear, the anger, the betrayal, it all crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. "We're not doing anything," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done cleaning up Ethan's messes. He made this bed. Now he has to lie in it," Marie gasped. "But Sarah, they could hurt him." I turned to her, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. "And what about how he's hurt us? How he's lied, stolen, and gambled away our futures? When does it end, Marie?" She flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. "We've coddled him, made excuses for him, and look where it's gotten us. No more." As I spoke, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For too long, I'd put Ethan's needs before my own. No more. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. "I'm leaving, Marie. For good this time." "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice small. I paused at the threshold, a glimmer of my new future taking shape in my mind. Somewhere Ethan can't find me, somewhere I can start over. As I walked out of Marie's house for the last time, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, it was mine to shape. I got into my car, Daisy meowing softly from her carrier in the back seat. As I drove away from the life I'd known, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. 6 months after I left, I found myself in a small coastal town, rebuilding my life piece by piece. My writing career had taken off, and Daisy and I had settled into a cozy apartment overlooking the ocean. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, my phone rang. Marie's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Sarah? Sarah?" Marie's voice was thin, desperate. "I need your help, please." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "What is it, Marie?" "It's Ethan," she sobbed. "He's in trouble. Those men he owes money to, they're threatening him. Us, I don't know what to do." A familiar knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. "I'm sorry, Marie, but I can't get involved. Not again." "But Sarah, you're the only one who can help. You always knew how to handle these situations." I felt a flicker of anger. "And look where that got me. I'm done cleaning up after Ethan's messes." "Please," Marie begged. "I'll do anything. I'll sell the house, my jewelry, everything. Just help us one last time." I paused, considering her words. Then, slowly, I made a decision that would change everything. "Okay, Marie," I said, my voice steady. "I'll help, but not in the way you think." I booked a flight back to my old town, a mix of dread and determination coursing through me. When I arrived at Marie's house, I found her a shell of her former self, aged beyond her years. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, ushering me inside. I took a deep breath. "Before we go any further, there's something you need to know, Marie. About Ethan. About everything." Over the next hour, I laid out the whole truth. Ethan's continued gambling, his lies about rehab, the depth of his debts. With each revelation, I watched Marie's world crumble a little more. But why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I met her gaze steadily. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of lying? Like you always did." Marie flinched, the truth of my words hitting home. "I'm telling you now," I continued, "because it's time for this cycle to end, for all of us." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello? Yes, I'd like to report a gambling addiction and associated criminal activities." Marie's eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing?" I held up a hand, silencing her. "Yes, I have evidence. Betting slips, bank statements, everything." As I spoke with the authorities, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. This was it, the final step in breaking free from the toxic cycle that had consumed our lives. When I hung up, Marie was crying softly. "How could you?" she whispered. I took her hand, surprising both of us. "This is the only way, Marie. Ethan needs real help, not enablers. And you need to break free too." As we waited for the police to arrive, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't revenge, I realized. It was redemption, for all of us. Hours later, as I watched Ethan being led away in handcuffs, a mix of emotions washed over me. Sadness for the man I once loved, relief that it was finally over, and hope for a future free from the shadows of addiction and deceit. Marie stood beside me, her face tear-stained but resolute. What happens now? She asked. I squeezed her hand gently. Now we heal, separately but maybe someday together. As I drove back to the airport, the sun setting over my old hometown, I felt a sense of closure. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I was facing it on my own terms. Back in my coastal refuge, I sat on the balcony with Daisy purring in my lap, watching the waves crash against the shore. I thought about trust, about honesty, about the complex web of love and hurt that binds families together. And as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to let go of the past and embrace an uncertain but hopeful future. With a smile, I picked up my pen and began to write. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.